Everyone tells you to keep your money safe in the bank. Sounds responsible, right? Yeah, until you realize you're paying a subscription fee to slowly become poorer. Because if inflation is quietly eating away at your money every year while your bank barely gives anything back, you're not really saving anything. You're just losing value slowly in a very polite way. And the dangerous part is most people think risk only means losing money fast, like when markets drop, but they completely ignore the kind where everything gets expensive while their money just sits there. And so over time, what feels safe is actually doing the most damage, because the place you trust to protect your money is quietly guaranteeing that it loses value year after year. There are two types of risk. One where things move up and down and feel scary, and another where your money slowly loses what it can buy. So naturally, we avoid the one that looks scary and walk straight into the one that quietly drains us over time. Which honestly sounds like a very well thought out financial strategy. So let's say you keep your money sitting in cash for years doing absolutely nothing while prices slowly keep rising in the background, and everything looks fine because the number never actually changes. But in reality, what that money can actually buy keeps shrinking every year even though the number looks the same, which is exactly why most people don't realize they're slowly becoming poorer. You just did the safe thing and still ended up losing a big portion of your actual wealth. A market crash feels like a tiger attack, loud and scary. But inflation is like termites, slowly destroying everything while you think you're safe. So one person keeps their money safe, earns a small return, watches it grow, but doesn't realize inflation is quietly eating that progress. Another person invests, deals with ups and downs, probably feels stressed at times, but over the long run ends up with more real value simply because their money actually kept growing. The same starting money, two completely different outcomes, and the only real difference wasn't luck or timing, it was simply understanding how money actually works instead of just trying to keep it safe out. And the funny part is the person who played it safe felt smart the entire time. No stress, no volatility, everything looked stable, which is exactly why they never realized what was actually happening. That is while the other person felt uncomfortable, watching their money go up and down, but ended up in a much better position in the long run. The truth is you can't avoid risk. You can only choose between short-term discomfort or long-term loss, where things slowly get worse. And over long periods, even small inflation quietly destroys your money, cutting its real value in half over time, even though nothing dramatic ever happened and everything still looked completely normal. And even when people think they're earning decent returns from savings accounts, inflation is still higher in many cases, which means they're technically making money and still going backwards at the same time. And once you factor in taxes on those so-called safe returns, the actual gain becomes even smaller, which means you're not just losing to inflation, you're losing even faster than you thought of. So you're technically making money on paper while actually going backwards in real life, which is honestly impressive if you think about it, because it feels like progress but works exactly the opposite. And so the goal isn't just to save money, it's to make sure your money grows faster than inflation over time. Otherwise, you're just slowly losing purchasing power without realizing it. Again, which usually means putting your money into things that can grow over time, like businesses, assets, or investments, instead of just letting it sit idle doing nothing. Cash isn't really an investment, it's just a place to temporarily hold money before using it somewhere more productive. So if your money isn't growing over time, it's not staying the same, it's slowly shrinking in real terms, even if everything looks completely stable on the surface. So cash feels safe because the number doesn't move and nothing looks volatile. But in financial terms, that stability is misleading, because the real value keeps dropping every year even when everything appears completely unchanged. While investing feels risky because prices move up and down and it looks unstable in the short term, but over longer periods, that movement is exactly what allows your money to grow and actually protect its real value. And so you're always taking a risk whether you realize it or not. The only decision is choosing between short-term volatility that feels uncomfortable or long-term loss that quietly reduces your purchasing power over time. So let's simplify it. Cash feels safe but loses value. Investing feels risky but protects your future. And once you understand that difference, you stop confusing comfort with actual financial security. If your money isn't growing over time, it's not actually staying the same. It's losing value every single year. You just don't notice it immediately because nothing dramatic ever happens. Yeah, so now I'm curious. Are you still keeping most of your money in cash thinking it's safe? Or have you started investing already? Because that one decision will decide how your money actually behaves over time. Be honest with yourself for a second. If most of your money is just sitting in cash right now, you're not really being safe. You're slowly losing value without realizing it every single year. And if you've already started investing and letting your money grow, even if it feels uncomfortable sometimes, you're actually on the path that protects your future instead of slowly reducing your purchasing power. So which one are you right now? The person who feels safe but is quietly losing value? Or the one who feels uncomfortable but is actually building real long-term financial strength? Drop it in the comments because I'm genuinely curious how people are thinking about this, and it's always interesting to see how many are still holding cash versus actually investing their money properly. And if you want content that actually helps you understand money instead of just motivating you for a few minutes, make sure you follow, because this is the stuff that actually changes how you think. Because understanding how money actually works is the only way to stop losing it slowly over time. And once you see it clearly, you can't really go back to thinking the same way again. And the reason this is so dangerous is because nothing feels wrong in the moment. There's no panic, no warning, just a slow, invisible loss that quietly reduces your money's real value over time. Because unlike market crashes where everything happens fast and feels dramatic, this kind of loss is slow and silent, which makes it even more dangerous since most people never even realize it's happening then. So people feel confident because the balance in their account looks stable and even slightly higher over time, but that confidence is based on numbers that don't reflect what their money can actually buy.
And that's the difference between nominal value and real value. One is just the number you see, the other is what your money can actually do for you in the real world over time.
And over long periods, this small difference compounds into a huge gap, which is why people who think they're being safe often end up with significantly less real wealth than they expected. So at the end of the day, it's not about avoiding risk. It's about understanding which risk you're actually taking. Because doing nothing with your money is still a decision with real consequences. And the biggest problem is comfort makes it feel like you're doing the right thing. Because nothing is fluctuating and everything looks stable, even though that stability is exactly what's costing you over time. Even though you don't see money disappearing from your account, its ability to buy things is constantly shrinking, a silent loss in the background. And because your account balance isn't dropping, it tricks you into thinking nothing is wrong, when in reality what that balance represents in terms of real value is constantly decreasing. And the longer this goes on, the worse it gets, because the effect compounds over time, turning what seems like a small difference each year into a massive gap in your actual purchasing power. People focus on avoiding short-term market losses, ignoring the bigger long-term risk quietly growing in the background. And that's why what feels safe in the short term often turns out to be the most expensive decision in the long term, especially when you don't realize what's actually happening underneath. And if you could actually see what inflation is doing to your money in real time, it wouldn't feel safe at all, because the value is constantly melting away even though the number looks perfectly stable. So you keep earning more money over time thinking you're making progress, but your expenses are rising just as fast, which means you're basically running harder every year just to stay in the same place. And the easiest way to understand this is your money isn't staying the same. What it can buy is shrinking, which means your lifestyle is quietly getting worse even if your income doesn't change. So inflation works like a hidden tax on your money, except you don't see it being deducted directly, which is why most people underestimate how much it's actually costing them over time. And once you understand this, the idea of keeping large amounts of money in cash stops feeling safe, because you realize you're not protecting your wealth, you're slowly letting it erode. So at the end of the day, doing nothing with your money isn't neutral. It's an active decision that slowly makes you poorer over time, even if it feels like you're playing it safe. It's like trying to fill a bucket with water while there's a small hole at the bottom. You keep adding more, but never realize that you're losing just as much at the same time. So even if you're standing still thinking nothing is changing, the system around you is constantly moving, which means staying in the same place actually pushes you backwards over time without you realizing it. And this is why inflation is so dangerous, because it works slowly like ice melting. You don't notice the change moment to moment, but over time, what you're left with is significantly less. So every time you think you're catching up financially, prices have already moved ahead of you, which means you're constantly chasing a moving target that keeps getting further away over time. And sometimes it even looks like you're progressing because the number is increasing, But that progress is misleading since it doesn't reflect what your money can actually buy in reality. And once you start seeing money this way, you realize that doing nothing is actually a decision, and that decision has a cost that keeps increasing the longer you ignore it.
It's like standing on solid ground that slowly turns into sand. You don't notice it at first, but over time you start sinking without doing anything wrong, just because the surface beneath you keeps shifting.
So even when you think you're moving forward step by step, the structure underneath is weakening, which means progress feels real but doesn't actually take you where you think it does. And every time you try to catch up financially, it feels like something pulls you back again, because the system is constantly adjusting, making it harder to actually move ahead in real terms. So even when everything looks open and possible, there's an invisible barrier slowing you down, and that barrier is inflation, quietly reducing how far your money can actually take you. And the biggest shift happens when you stop looking at money as just numbers and start seeing it as purchasing power, because that's when you realize the gap between what you have and what it's worth. And once you truly understand that, you stop asking how much money you have and start asking what it can actually do for you, because that's the only metric that really matters over time. Which means if your money isn't growing faster than inflation, you're not staying where you are, you're moving backwards, just slowly enough that it feels normal until you actually stop and think about it. But and once that clicks, the whole idea of playing it safe starts to feel completely different, because now you can actually see the cost of doing nothing instead of just assuming it's the safest option. So now I'm curious, are you still holding most of your money in cash thinking it's safe? Or have you started putting it into things that actually grow and protect your future over time? And if you want to actually understand how money works instead of just guessing, follow along. Because once you start seeing it this way, you'll notice things you completely ignored before.